Hey everybody, welcome to Teal Tinted Glasses, episode 15. Today we got a whole bunch of stuff to decompress, so sit tight, grab a pillow, get some caffeine maybe. I don't know, we're going to be here all night with everything I have on my list, so hopefully you guys enjoy. I think, I want to start by, just saying, yo dog, I know you like sharks in your tank, so we put sharks in a tank so you can watch the sharks tank while they tank. It's awesome. It's going to be great. Today with me is Hockey Jerk tonight. Unfortunately, Kevin Lacey could not be with us, but Hockey Jerk is here. So we are going to, get this done.
Yeah, they put the sea critters in the tank today. So, it's real. You guys, there's no turning back now, you guys. There will be live at the tank this year. Plan your selfies accordingly.
Yes, Kevin Lacey's on assignment with real life. So I mean the Sharks have a tank in the tank, so you can tank while they tank. I don't know. Guess we could start off with that. We have some Sharks news straight off the bat to start off with. Sharks signed Barracuda defenseman Jacob Middleton to NHL entry-level contract. Last year, for those that don't know, Jacob Middleton, a guy who got a lot of positive praise on this show for sure, he was on an AHL-only contract, and after his play last year, he got rewarded with an NHL contract. I don't know how soon we might see him get called up, but I think that, 3-year entry-level contract is a nice reward for a guy who played some really good hockey last year. Jerk, what was your reaction to the Jacob Middleton signing?
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw the signing, just because, Middleton, I feel, was the Barracuda's most improved defenseman this season. When you consider the first half of the season, he was a healthy scratch, or he was, in a seventh defenseman role. And then, come second half, he's on the bottom pair with Nick DeSimone, and they actually were able to take some ice time away from Mirko Mueller and Julius Bergman, which is always a great thing. But I think he earned it. He, like I said, he definitely improved. He showed that, like the Sharks, the Barracuda have a steady defensive core, top to bottom, 1 through 6, and I want to see what he can do. Not only a full year with Nick DeSimone, but in general, just a full year as the 6th defenseman or the 5th defenseman.
I'm curious if he can break top, if he can get into like the bottom 4 even. Just because there's going to be some flux, and it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not sure who the heir apparent is for that 5th spot right now, or the 4th spot right now. I feel like the top pair, depending on how things go down, is likely going to be the top pair again, unless they keep Heat up to play, to be the 7th defenseman, or he beats Dylan DeMello for the number 6 job out of camp. It'll be interesting to see if who they match up down there. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him even slide into that middle pair.
So yeah, I agree with you, especially because during playoffs, Roy Sommer showed he trusted Middleton, and to a lesser extent DeSimone. Like I said, putting them out there over Mirko Mueller and Julius Bergman, who Roy Sommer knows more about. I'm more curious to see. You talked about the flux of defensemen and how many different guys are coming in. I'm wondering if, with Tim Heed, in my eyes, going to the NHL roster, I wonder if we see Bergman and Ryan together, or if they stay separated.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there, because, I mean, without Heed, I mean, you got Ryan, you've got kind of Bergman. I don't know if you want to. It's going to be interesting defense, because you have a flux of guys coming in. You have a decent guys down there. I'm a big fan of Nick DeSimone. But there are also other guys coming in like Semick coming in, and that could, maybe he slots in beside Ryan. I'm not sure. I've never, again, I don't really know a ton about this guy, but everything I hear about him has been good.
And you know what? Now that you mention him, I actually think he would be a better fit for Joachim Ryan, just because, at the prospect scrimmage in July, he really got to show off, his bomb from the point. And I think, when you're comparing him to a Tim Heed, I think they're very similar players. And I think the shot from the point, I think, is going to be essential, just because, as I've mentioned before, the Barracuda, especially in the third round against Grand Rapids, had a lot of trouble getting shots through from the point.
Yes, yeah.
And you could even make the same argument about the Sharks. So if you have guys who can get the puck through, you generally don't want to handicap those guys.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point you bring up. Moving on to the next topic, I don't know if you saw this today, but George Peros is now the new director of player safety.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I'm kind of sad, only because I was hoping. Yeah, right. Or I was hoping him and Jody Shelley would kind of take the reins together, but that's wishful thinking. I mean, I feel like guys who are kind of former, we'll call them agitators. They tend to,
George Peros was a flat out enforcer. I think there's no. He's a flat out enforcer. He killed people.
They tend to kind of know what to look for when it comes to players being kind of shady. And so I think by that respect, I think it's a smart ad, because, you could, let's say you put like somebody who's never played hockey before, or somebody who kind of stayed out of the physicality. It's, it's all about what you see on the tape. But a guy like George Peros, who, like we both said, is a enforcer, agitator, whatever you want to call him, he knows what subtle things to look for, and he knows what to look for because he's lived through it. So I think using that experience will make him a good head of player safety.
Yeah, like he said a lot of good things, like Vince G bringing up in the chat here how he wants to get away from the puck stuff. He apparently wants to like really clamp down on some of the stick work on the hands. George Peros is a smart guy. I think he's a Harvard graduate, if I remember correctly. He's a smart dude. And I think that, I think that he's going to be good for the job. The problem I have with this guy, with guys like this in this department is, and I want to say this without getting myself into too much trouble here and starting a conversation of whatever, but I feel like a lot of these old enforcers, and Peros being one of them, they have a very, I don't know how to say this. They have a very unique view of their role in the game, and sometimes it's to the point of just like laughter. I wish I could put that in better words, but I can't summon the words that I want to make that sound better. I feel like they just have this glorified romantic feeling about what their role was in the league. And as much as that role continues to go away, like, you still have guys getting contracts that, Pittsburgh went out and got Ryan Reeves, for God's sakes. This is a team that just won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, decided, we really need to get worse here. So let's go get Ryan Reeves so he can protect so he can protect Sidney Crosby or whatever. Like, it just bothers me, because I feel like with those guys in those positions, it's you're just kind of playing into that still, where it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying, the Department of Player Safety is always going to be this controversial thing, because, if they don't give you, if you're a fan and the offending team doesn't get the suspension that you want, they're garbage. And if your team gets any suspension from them, they're garbage. So they're in a real can't win situation, but I worry about that element of it, that romantic notion towards the enforcer that really just shouldn't be there anymore in 2017. Those guys have been basically pushed out by better skilled players.
And, you know, you bring up an excellent point there. Hockey Jerk's favorite player. You bring up an excellent point because, you know, how many times do we see enforcers or agitators, you know, on television panels, and they say, you know, when I was in the game, you wouldn't get away with this, that, and the other, and trying to compare, as you said, a more skilled game to, you know, a game where, oh, you know how to tie your skates? Okay, go out there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on that. Next topic up, really happened surprisingly, you know, that things can happen in Canada and no one knows about them. The Winnipeg Jets quietly re-signed Paul Maurice and Kevin Cheveldayoff to extensions. Paul Maurice, of course, is their head coach. Kevin Cheveldayoff is the GM. They both got signed to multi-year contracts over the summer. What say you?
I'm very surprised. Not so much about Kevin Cheveldayoff. I think Kevin Cheveldayoff is a very brilliant man. When you consider, I mean, Patrick Laine, slam dunk, but, you know, you look at a Nikolai Ehlers paying dividends. You look at Mark Scheifele taking at number 7. You know, I remember watching that draft, and when he took Mark Scheifele, it was very, ooh, okay,
what
you took
doing?
him there. Yeah, you took him there. And now look, Mark Scheifele for the second year in a row was top 10 in scoring. And he's probably the next captain of the Jets if Blake Wheeler ever leaves. So I think Kevin Cheveldayoff has absolutely earned. But Paul Maurice is an interesting case because I feel like Paul Maurice has been on the hot seat for like 2 years now. And the Jets are a difficult one because I think they have a very underrated team. I think they're kind of like Buffalo West, where if things could go right for them, they could be a playoff team and even a top 3 in the division team. But 7 years into Jets 2.0, and they've won 0 playoff games.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, Maurice hasn't been the coach the whole time, but it's like, at what point do you have to change the mindset of thinking when it comes to, I guess, operating that team? And you could argue some of that falls on Cheveldayoff, but again, I feel like his acquisition of players has earned him the right to stick around. But Maurice, I'm not so sure on. I think even though he signed this extension, I think this year is still a make or break year for him.
Yeah, Paul Maurice, like, I like Paul Maurice as an NHL coach. I mean, he seems like he gets, like, I always find that Paul Maurice gets more than he should have, like than he should out of NHL teams. Like, I feel like, you know, and it doesn't always last, but I feel like anytime Paul Maurice goes into a situation, he seems like he always gets more than he should have out of the teams that he's coached. Generally the teams have been garbage too, which doesn't help him. The thing that the beef that I have with Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I agree with what you say. I mean, look at there's a lot of nice things there. The problem that I have with Kevin Cheveldayoff is that drafting's only part of the game. And I feel like unless he's been absolutely backed into a corner, he just refuses to make trades.
Right.
And that I find very troublesome because look at, I think that last year when Hellebuck was struggling, you know, there's goalies out there that could have been brought in to try and stabilize that situation. And then maybe they're a playoff team. I'm not saying getting rid of Hellebuck was the answer. I mean, I think that would be an absolute disaster, but I feel like this team, you know, I can't help but feel like this team could get closer if maybe they pulled the trigger on a deal and brought in some guys, you know.
That's fair to say, just because I can't really remember off the top of my head, but the year the Sharks missed the playoffs when the Jets made it, I don't recall them making a move to kind of bolster their team. And I could totally be talking out of my ass on this one, and I have no idea, but I just don't feel like they did anything, you know, despite knowing that they were going to be a playoff team, they were just like, yeah, we'll stick with it. And I mean, look what it got them. They didn't win a single playoff game, but I don't know. It's a tough one because, like I said, I feel like they have a good team, but for some reason things just aren't going right for them.
Right. Because I look at this is what separates them from a team like Nashville, though, because Nashville drafts incredibly well too, but they didn't draft Ryan Johansson.
That is true.
Right. Like they've brought in players that can, that have basically elevated what they had. They have a great core of players that they drafted. I mean, aside from PK Subban, that almost all the defensemen on that roster, they developed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's frustrating for me because like there's a part of me that wants to see the Jets do well, not at the Sharks' expense, obviously. And I just feel like, like Kevin Cheveldayoff, like there's just too much lackadaisical. Like it just feels like, nothing ever happened. Like Kevin Cheveldayoff's basically always been safe. I can't remember the previous coach's name, but they kept him far too long. Like they're just way too, they don't like to make changes. It's like a family business. And I just feel like I almost liken it to the problems in Montreal where you have to find these French Canadian speaking people. Mm-hmm. Like Winnipeg's kind of in the same sense where it's like it's run like a family business and everyone's family and you just can't fire family even if they're not getting the job done.
I will say the one thing that Kevin Cheveldayoff has done right in terms of not drafting related things was the trade of Andrew Ladd, because that, and even the trade for Evander Kane as well. Like I will hear your argument that he doesn't trade probably when he should, but the very small amount of trades that he has made, for the most part, have been home runs, I would say. I mean, you get a first-round draft pick plus for Andrew Ladd, winner. You're a winner there. You get, Tyler Myers, who's not a bad defenseman, and I can't recall who else they got, but in the Evander Kane trade, Evander Kane was a problem, and they got a first-round pick in that trade as well. If you can trade a problem and get a good return, good move on my book. I would also like to mention, and this is kind of off topic, but in mentioning Connor Hellebuck, we are now 1/3 of the way to summoning Drew Weber.
Damn it. All right. So do you have any Carolina stuff in the notes? No, we're safe. Okay. Yeah. So, and actually we might as well hit this right now too. Vince G asking about the Ryan Ellis situation. Obviously, Ryan Ellis out for 4 to 6 months now. I mean, that's a huge loss for Nashville. I don't know. I mean, look, at Nashville's really deep on the blue line, but that's a tough loss.
And when they acquired Alexei Yemelin from Vegas, I was kind of confused as to why they would pick him up, just because I didn't feel that they needed him. But you know what? The Ellis going down makes the Yemelin trade all the more important, because Yemelin's not a bad defenseman, and you throw him in, you still have Subban, you still have Yossi, you still have Matthias Ekholm, you still have Matt Irwin, who I think is underrated. Hurts. Losing Ellis hurts, but I think overall, they'll be able to survive until January without Ellis, just because they're very defense by committee.
Yeah,
that's how they play, and I mean, obviously, it's worked for them.
Yeah, the blue line's so deep there that it sucks, but it's like, oh no, now I just my number 4 defenseman, that would be a number 2 defenseman, another team went down. What am I gonna do now? Like, I don't know. Erik Karlsson, speaking of defensemen that are the walking wounded, Erik Karlsson's questionable for the camp/season opener. Obviously that's not good for the Ottawa Senators faithful.
Well, I mean, what do you expect? You play at such a high level with multiple hairline fractures in your heel. Generally, you're not going to have a good time. But geez, I mean, you could argue that playing with this injury made him less likely to be ready for the season opener. But then at the same time, I feel like as a Senators fan, you have to wonder if it was worth it. And I think it was, considering they made it to the East Final. But
yeah,
I just don't know if...
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't know if Ottawa survives without him.
Oh, no. I mean, like, Ottawa, to me, was like, this was the team where I'm just like, okay, this team's not for real. This team's not for real. This team's not... Oh, they're in the Eastern Conference Final. Jeez. Like, I don't know what to make of this team going into the season this year. And we're going to talk about the Atlantic Division later, but, like, I still don't know what to make of this team. Like, I still don't believe what happened last season, and I don't even know what to make of them. But I know that without Erik Karlsson, that's not a way you want to start the season without him. Another thing on the Senators, and I forgot to put this in the notes, but apparently they removed 1,500 seats from the arena. I don't know. I've heard to make it look more full. I don't know what the actual explanation is. I thought it was amusing, though, and the only reason I bring this up is because if a team like San Jose or the Florida Panthers or, the Ducks or, insert Sunbelt team here, remove 1,500 seats from their arena, the entire Canadian media would line up in front of the trough to take a whiz, like all over that team. But because it's Ottawa, it's like it gets like a little mention and then everyone seems like fine with it. And I love the hypocrisy.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was funny just because wasn't, in the Eastern Conference Final, wasn't 1,500 empty seats? Like, weren't there 1,500 empty seats for that game? Like, I think that's what it is to make, the building seem full, I guess. But at the same time, unless they have some kind of long-term plan, whether it be some kind of exclusive lounge or, some kind of patio or whatever these stupid gimmicky things that arenas are doing now, I just don't see why it needed to happen. Like, if you put a good if you put a good product on the ice, the people will come. But at the same time, this goes back to what we said, last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever about, Ottawa's arena being in a really crappy location. Like,
yeah, it's in Canada, which is a jaunt. Like, Canada's kind of like on the outside. Like, if you're coming into Ottawa, it's great. But if you actually live in like deep in Ottawa, coming out to Canada is not exactly a fantastic time.
Yeah, that's like, I wouldn't, like, if I lived in downtown San Jose and the SAP Center was in like Gilroy or Los Gatos or somewhere that's about the same distance away, I sure as hell wouldn't go as much,
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I thought it was funny just because like the kind of the hypocrisy, right? Where it's like,
absolutely.
If it was like a Sunbelt team, like we would never hear the end of it. It would be like the punchline of every joke on TSN, and it's just amusing to me that they get away with it. But I'm gonna actually get back onto stuff that's in the notes. Interesting thing here, and this I do want to spend a teeny bit of time on. So there's a new rule this season. Actually, there's two new rules coming in for this season. The first, we already knew about it, the no more timeouts after icing. This has been a rule in the AHL forever. I don't really notice it in the AHL. Like, it's never really bothered me watching Barracuda games. The next one makes me angry. And that is the NHL is now going to give a team a 2-minute minor penalty for a failed offside review.
Well,
I feel like
it's just,
this is taking a sledgehammer when you need like a little like chisel.
Well, and that's the thing is, where does it end? Because the NHL has a problem, and so they make a rule to fix the problem, and then a new problem develops because of the new rule, so they just make a new rule to fix the problem. Like, where does it end? Next summer, are they going to make a rule be about some problem that comes out of this new rule? Like, are we just in an endless loop from here on out? Like, don't get me wrong, I think, and I'm in the minority on this, and I admit this, I think the offside challenge is a good rule to have, and I think it should stay. But at the same time, I'm of the belief that if you can't decide if it was offside with your eyes, then it's not conclusive. Because, and this is the thing I don't understand, is the coach on the bench sees the play go down and thinks it's offside and challenges it. So why do the linesmen struggle with it when they get like 4 to 7 minutes to watch it on a screen? I mean, I don't want to crap on linesmen because I'm not trained to be a linesman at all, but I feel like there's some kind of gap there when it comes to being able to really look and see if something is offside, whether it's a hair offside or it's like an entire, foot offside. But I just think the NHL is putting themselves in this endless loop where they're going to create a rule that eliminates a problem that was created by a previous rule. And I just think it's going to keep on going until eventually you get a delay game penalty for, going offside in general. I don't know.
See, here's the problem I have with it. And it's that, like, I understand why they put the rule in, right? It's because, like, the time, I think it was like Matt Duchene was like a foot, like 5 feet offside and scored a goal, right?
It's one of my favorite memes of all time.
Yes. Right. And, like, obviously you want to get that. The problem is now is we have these, like, 15-minute reviews for, like, this this offside that you would never see with the naked eye. Like, it's this smidge offline. And, like, that really bothers me. And the fact that now, like, the other problem that I hate too with these offside challenges is, like, the play was in the zone for like 2 minutes, but it was, they came in offside 2 minutes ago. Like, stop those, like, have a time limit of how long. Like, if you take the zone offside and it's like a smidge offside, whatever, and and then you're in the zone for like 2 minutes and then finally you score, then leave it alone.
Right. And I mean, I think an opinion I've had, and I think some may feel it's an extreme opinion, but I've kind of been wondering if making the blue line itself smaller would lead to players entering the zone quicker and not having to kind of stretch as much, which could potentially lead to less offside calls. That's just something that I've thought about. I don't know if there would be any, if it would work at all, but it's something that I've considered.
Also, the other thing they need to get rid of, as long as the puck goes in before the body, I don't care if your skate is behind your ear or on the ice. Like, let's get rid of that too. Like this, no, because the skate was, an inch off the ice, so that's offside. Like, enough. Just make it simple. And then not be dumb about it. I feel like this is, again, this is something where you should have gone in, you go and you make like a nice surgical strike. You don't just nuke the entire problem. And that's what they've did. I feel like they've dropped a nuke on a problem where they could have done a nice little surgical strike and fixed it. But instead, no, we got to make it as terrible as humanly possible. It's gonna be interesting to see how often coaches are going to go for that offside challenge. So I mean, it could reduce it, and I am not a fan of goal and then they review it and then someone challenges and then they need to get the game speed back up. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, at the rate the NHL is on when it comes to making new rules, don't be surprised if two-line pass makes a comeback.
Yeah. I feel like, it'll be interesting. I mean, Peter DeBoer loves to waste challenges. So I expect the Sharks to be in the box all the time after dumb Peter DeBoer challenges. So maybe I'm just worried about this as a fan. I don't like it. I think it's incredibly punitive. And so now I'm assuming you lose your timeout and you get a 2-minute penalty. Like, that just seems it seems like a lot when it's not football. You don't get 17 timeouts during the course of the game. You get one. So I just get 17 timeouts in the course of a football game. I just made that number up arbitrarily.
I think the goal is to deter coaches from challenging for offside, But this kind of goes back to my endless loop thing, where if you want to deter coaches from challenging offsides, why make the offside challenge a thing?
Right.
You know, we can blame Matt Duchene for that because he was like a full 12 strides ahead of the blue line and still caught a breakaway pass and it was no problem. But
yeah,
I don't.
Damn Matt Duchene.
I know.
Doesn't get traded, makes our summer boring, gives us stupid offside rules. Like, Matt Duchene's a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done with Matt Duchene. Okay, so that's the new rules for this season. Again, I don't think do you have any issue with the no offsides after icing, or no timeout after icing?
So it's funny that you mentioned that they were already doing that in the AHL, because I actually didn't know that. Which should go to show you that I don't think it will be a problem when, I've been watching AHL hockey closely for the last 2 years and I've never noticed once. So I think it'll, and I'm not really concerned about it.
Yeah, me neither. Good old Kevin Kurz, friend of the show, reports that the Sharks won't be sending any PTOs to any players. So that, if you thought Yager was going to get a PTO, get that silly thought out of your head. Bizarre move. Like, I understand, like, the Sharks are going all in with the kids, and look at a lot of these people that get PTOs now. A lot of them get PTOs just so that they have bodies to fill their training camp requirements for players that have played X number of games. And I feel like that's why a lot of teams get PTOs, give out a lot of PTOs too, because then they can, rest some of their other players a little bit longer. I'm not surprised, because I don't think I've been really sour on this free agent class. I don't think there's really anyone in this free agent class that's super, oh my God, we got to get that guy. But I don't know. I mean, it's just I can understand why some Sharks fans are really frustrated at this point, though. Like, just with the lack of anything.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you touched on the youth movement, and I think that's what the goal is in not signing anybody to a PTO. But, youth movement is fine and all, but, you talk about the Sharks, still being a Stanley Cup team, and, they lose Marlowe on a team that already struggled and don't replace him. Like, 2 + 2 does not equal 5, like, you can't get worse and still claim that you're one of the best teams. Like, that's not how it works. And I don't know. I think if the Sharks really do believe that they are a Stanley Cup contender, then those thoughts are going to be eliminated very soon on, because, like I said, you lose your best goal scorer from an already, not good team or not great team. It's not a recipe for success. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's not really anyone on PTO I think would come in and be like, oh man, that's the guy that's going to replace the offense. But I mean, to not even look, it just seems odd. Especially
when you look at, and I mean, you and I talked about this yesterday, P.A. Parento, who's like on his 13th PTO
right
in a row, and who consistently puts up, around 15 or more goals, and
usually gets a decent return at the trade deadline too.
That too. I mean, if the Sharks want to guarantee themselves a 3rd round pick, they should have signed a P.A. Parento, or, even Thomas Vanek. Thomas Vanek is not the 40 goal scorer that he was in Buffalo, but he still provides some form of offensive prowess. And I think 1 year at $2 million, like, that's a very movable contract. And given the Sharks' current salary cap, structuring and payroll, they could seamlessly fit that in.
Right, and that actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously that would be the next thing on the agenda, is Thomas Vanek with this 1 year, $2 million contract in Vancouver. And I look at this team and I think, like, this is a team, I guess, is another team that's supposed to be, doing a youth movement, but more honestly, because they know that they're going to be bad. And I look at this team and I go, well, Thomas Vanek, yeah, I mean, that's gonna, you could probably flip him for a 2nd or 3rd at the trade deadline, but I mean, you're still you're blocking someone at that point. Like Thomas Vanek is flat out just blocking somebody from getting that shot.
Yeah, and you could make the same argument even for Louis Eriksson. I mean, you think about how many young guys Vancouver has picked up in the last 2 years, Besser, Goldobin, even, guys they still have, Jake Virtanen, Sven Barchi, It's the same thing with the Sharks. These guys aren't going to become, 50, 60 point guys overnight. You have to play them and see what you have in them. And, you sign Thomas Vanek, who, it will almost certainly become a second round pick. But Louis Eriksson and guys of that, what are you doing? You're not a good team. You wasted the Sedins. Just give it up,
Give it a rest. Alex Wenberg gets 6 years, 4.9 million AAV in Columbus. I don't watch a lot of Columbus, but I will say that I watch a lot of Twitter. And Alex Wenberg's gift seemed to show up every time Columbus was playing. So I like this deal for Columbus.
You know what I like about this deal is there are so many times where we see a contract given out and it's, the contract is what they expect the player will become, which, your prime example is, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, and even Vladimir Tarasenko at the time it was signed. But, this Alex Wenberg signing, 6 years is fine because he's a young guy as it is. But, an annual average value of under $5 million, that's a bargain. That's a bargain right now, today, September 7th, 2017. Imagine at the end of this deal, if he is a point per game player, that's deal of the century right there. They signed him to a deal that he's worth now, not what he'll be worth in a couple of years. So I think Columbus has really put them in a position to be a good team. And it's especially convenient when you consider that they have Brandon Dubinsky on the payroll for a lot of money that he's not worth.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Anthony Duclair, 1 year, 1.2 million in Arizona, obviously gets a show me contract. I think Anthony Duclair, I like this deal because I don't think, I think that Tippett really messed with Duclair's development. And it's nice to see that he's going to get that shot with Tippett gone to see what he can still do and become. I really like this deal for Arizona. I think it's another huge win for John Chayka. Yeah,
I agree. If he can, if he can be a 20-goal scorer like he was 2 years ago, absolutely, it's a good deal. And, you can kind of, say that, he's a changed player, he's back on track or whatever you want to call it. But, if it doesn't, if the goals don't come to him again another year, I think he's gone. I think Arizona just walks away from him, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, but at 1.2 million, for a team that's not going to sniff anywhere near the salary cap.
And exactly. And this again goes back on, when what we said about Thomas Vanek and even, kind of what Winnipeg did with Evander Kane, where, if you have someone that's not working out, you could trade him for an asset.
Yep. They did. Look what they got in return for Anthony DeAngelo. Yeah,
exactly.
So, Sean Chayka's a wizard. I don't care what anyone says. He's easily, I think, now obviously, look at the Coyotes are going to have to actually have a winning season at some point here. But I know it's going to be silly for me to say this without the Coyotes actually having success. But in my opinion, Chayka's easily in the top 5 GMs in the league right now.
Yeah,
easily.
Exactly.
I reserve the right to knock him down if the Coyotes continue to flounder at the bottom of the Pacific Division. But I just I look at what this guy's done for the deals he's done it with, the trades he's made, and I can't help but be in awe. This is why I like when people think outside of the box and hire guys that aren't just retreads. And this is why you do that, because sometimes you find a guy like this who is just I'm completely in awe of.
Yeah, He's really smart. He's been the trades he has pulled off have been, good trades for his team. I still think, don't get me wrong. a very underrated defenseman. But you pick up a Nick Hjalmarsson, and I'm of the belief that Nick Hjalmarsson is a number 2 defenseman on a team not named Chicago. Like, I'm a big fan of Nick Hjalmarsson, and
I wish with all my wishing lucky stars that the Sharks would have just gotten Hjalmarsson instead of Niemi.
Oh yeah, me too, 1,000%. But you look at that, you look at, Derek Stepan is only 2 seasons removed from scoring, I believe he had 50 points, and Antti Ranta, I believe, is going to be like the next, Cam Talbot, Martin Jones, Robin Leonard kind of thing, where he gradually comes into a starting role. And I think Arizona is on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, I do not disagree there. All right, what else we got here? I need to get. Okay, Andreas Athanasiou. Obviously, Detroit. I don't know what Ken Holland's doing anymore. Like, I just feel like, someone needs to plug Ken Holland's brain back into the charger. I don't know.
No, here's what it is with Ken Holland. Is you're playing, and we've seen this with many GMs before, ball with your good young players because you don't want to, upset your older guys who, are your buddies. I mean, yeah. I like Darren Helm, but is he a $4 million player?
No, one of the worst contracts in the league.
Yeah. Justin Abdelkader may be worth his contract, but, since that year where he had 20, he hasn't really done a whole lot. And I think Detroit...
That man is an Olympian, thank you very much. Or no, he was in the World Cup team, right? Not the Olympics.
Well, the NHL will tell you it's practically the same thing.
Right, that's true. My bad.
But I feel like Ken Holland operates the Detroit Red Wings like he's playing, GM mode on the NHL video game where, your best player leaves? Okay, just go to free agency, sign the best guy for a 1-year deal at a lot of money so he joins your team, and then go from there. Like, I was never a fan of the Mike Green signing. I'm sure as hell not a fan of the Trevor Daley signing, and I think you're right. He needs to be plugged back in. I think, he's been having too much Little Caesars. He needs to.
There's just some guys just never adjusted to the new era. I mean, we've had defensemen that couldn't water ski anymore, and we've had GMs that just don't know how to GM with a salary cap. And right. I mean, Detroit right now is over the salary cap, I believe, by $3 million, and that's including LTIR guys that will be on the LTIR when the season starts. So they're already over cap. They don't have Athanasiou signed yet. They really have, they're kind of really over the barrel here. Now, it's interesting though, because the big question is why has no one thrown this guy an offer sheet yet? And I feel like, I look at Andreas Athanasiou has a shot, but doesn't have a whole lot else. The rest of his game is kind of, it's okay. The underlying numbers are okay, but there's nothing super special about them other than that shot. And I know, and as Zach reminded me on Twitter, you can do all those other skills. You can't teach that shot. And I agree. The problem I have is that I feel like unless you're going to really overpay him, and I think this is the danger here, is that I don't think this is a guy you want to just throw a crap ton of money at and to make Detroit walk away and take the compensation. So I feel like any deal you give him that's reasonable, he's still more valuable than the compensation that Detroit will get. And even though they're in cap hell, they will match.
Yeah. And, Zach, mentioned a really good thing. He does have a really good shot. And after a certain point, you can't teach that. I think, everything else, you can absolutely teach that. And I think Athanasiou is a very underrated skater.
Sure.
And I think he should be, and I think he is, part of their young future. You look at him, you look at Dylan Larkin, you look at Anthony Mantha, and even Tatar and Nyquist. I mean, they're not, as old as they were when they won the Calder Cup, but they're not ancient either.
No.
I think they have the makings of a really good young core. But, like I said, playing hardball with the young guys in order to satisfy the older guys on bad contracts. I mean, it's just not a recipe for success. I mean, I was surprised that Thomas Tatar re-signed, considering he said that this year was going to be his last year in Detroit. You know, it's like I was surprised he was able to get re-signed. But here's the thing about Detroit: is they're in a position that I think is funny when it's not the Sharks, where they're not a good team, but they don't have anything to be excited about for the future either. Yes, they have, like I said, some good young players already, but they don't have any really quality draft picks coming into my knowledge. I mean, Tyler Bertuzzi is a good piece, but beyond that, they don't have a superstar waiting in the wings who's going to, come in and, be part of the new era. Like Detroit is stuck. They're stuck with Franzen. They're stuck with Helm. They're stuck with Jonathan Ericsson. They're stuck with Trevor Daley and Jimmy Howard. The Detroit is going to be crap for a long time. And I'm sorry if you're a Red Wings fan, but
Jimmy Howard apparently is the guy again.
Yeah. Like, okay. I guess Peter Mrazek just didn't cut it.
Well, he was pretty bad last season.
Yeah, but Detroit as a whole was pretty bad.
That's the problem, right? Like with Detroit, and then we'll get off of this and move on to Vegas because we're probably going a little longer on this than I wanted to. But like the thing with Detroit is like it seems like every time, like that's the other problem. They have too much money wrapped up in goaltending, and every time they think they've got their starter figured out, the other guy ends up being the guy, and it never fails. So it's like this year, Jimmy Howard's supposed to be the guy. So on your fantasy team, guys, Peter Mrazek. That's your pick for fantasy this year. You can thank me later. Yeah, I mean, that's basically, the news of the week. I mean, there's a lot of news. I mean, yeah, a bunch of more PTOs went out, but honestly, like I could, rhyme off a bunch of PTOs, and most of these guys aren't going to make it, so who cares? Right? Come on, guys. We all know that. So let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights because, it's our division preview as it chugs along. Incoming to the team this year is the whole team because there was not a Vegas Golden Knights last year. So out nobody because although, you could argue guy like Schlemko, they haven't played a game yet. So therefore no one's really out.
Will they have Schlemko drop the puck though? Will he be the first member of the Alumni Association?
You never know. I think he'll probably be playing some games in Montreal first. Their top prospects, they do have some nice prospects. You've got guys like Nick Suzuki, Alex Tuck, Nick Hague, Eric Brannisturm, Cody Glass, Reed Duke, some other dudes too. I mean, like they've picked up some nice pieces to start their franchise with. I mean, this is a team, like, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know it's like it's our division preview, but we have a pretty decently sized mailbag, and Vegas is one team, like, other than the Sharks, we've really done to death. We were here talking when the team was picked, when the expansion lists were released, and then after the team was picked, we were here, we talked about it. I mean, I don't know what we could say on Vegas that we haven't already said at this point. Can you think of anything?
I mean, I think I really like their prospects. You look at you're with your buddy, and you say, "Oh, hey, did you see that Vegas drafted Cody Glass?" And your buddy's like, "Oh, no way, he's gonna be a good player for them." And then you're like, "Oh, just wait, there's more." They also have Nick Suzuki, and they were able to pry Alex Tuck away from the Minnesota Wild. Like Vegas, I mean, I think Vegas can sniff the playoffs, but I don't think they'll get in. I think they'll be like, outside the window with the pie on the windowsill, and they'll just get there, and then the window will close. But I think they're going to be a better team than a lot of people give them credit for, considering they have a legitimate starting goalie, and they actually have some decent young defensemen and some decent goal scorers. But, this prospect pool, providing they're not rushed or anything like that, I think they could be a decent team 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, here's my predictions for Vegas. Vegas will continue to have, as Vince G in the chat just mentioned, they will continue to have the best Twitter, the best run Twitter of any NHL team. You can take that to the bank. The thing is, I've had a problem because there's a part of me that thinks, this team isn't good enough to really do anything. I'm really worried about where the goals are going to come from for Vegas, because they have some good scorers, but they don't really have any guy that's going to be, the guy. And, and I keep struggling over who's going to be worse, Vegas or Vancouver. And maybe they finish 7th, because I feel like Vancouver, there's another team where you're like, okay, where are the goals going to come from, especially if they don't figure out Horvat. And then, but when you look at their defense, and then Vancouver's goaltending, which is atrocious, in Vancouver, Vegas finishing ahead of Vancouver wouldn't surprise me. And I keep going back and forth as I write all this. I've been working on a lot of season preview stuff for Puck Pros, and I'm working on a couple of really big projects there. And one of them is the Pacific Division, and trying to, even though I've done the show and I've kind of laid out things, and then I go back and I'm reading what I'm writing, and oh man, I don't know, man. It's so hard to call, because there's so many variables, but I just feel like they're no better than 7th, just with how the other teams have improved. I still think even if the Arizona Coyotes don't improve as much as maybe we'd like them to, they're still better than Vegas.
Yeah, I think you're right in your analysis there of saying that they probably finished 7th, but Kevin said in the chat, there's no way Vegas is worse than Vancouver, and I agree with him 100%. Vegas has a starting goalie.
Yes.
In Marc-Andre Fleury. Vancouver does not.
Vancouver has what? It's Jacob Markstrom still?
Jacob Markstrom. Yeah. What could have been, but, his playoff performances the last couple of years haven't been the best, but, James Neal, you can always count on James Neal for 20 goals at least. And I'm curious to see what he can do with Shipachev, because, the last time James Neal was on the wing of a Russian center, he scored 42 goals. So, it's really going to be interesting to see. I like Shipachev. I like his game in the KHL, and I'll be the first to tell you the KHL is much different from the NHL, but I think Shipachev is old enough to where his game will translate to the NHL.
Oh yeah, he's decently, 30, right?
And yeah, I think he's 31 or 32.
Okay.
And, he was on St. Petersburg, who was the best team in the KHL the last 3 years. He played with Evgeny Dadonov, who has some NHL experience. He played with, Kovalchuk, Datsuk, Slava Voynov, Sergei Plotnikov, all these guys who have NHL experience, who I assume were like, this is what the NHL is like, experience is everything. And like I said, I want to see what Shipachev can do with James Neal. I think Jonathan Marchessault is more of a wild card. I think if he got close to 30 again, I think that would be awesome. I don't expect it to happen, but then, they have a lot of other good guys too. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm a big fan of, I like Eric Howla.
Yeah.
I think he's a good player for them. He's probably going to be in their bottom 6, but even then it'll make for a pretty decent bottom 6.
But you still, you got guys like Nate Schmidt, you got, Shea Theodore on the defense. Yeah. There's a lot to like about Vegas. I just don't know if there's enough to like about Vegas where, you know what I mean? There's a lot to like. I think they're intriguing, and I'm intrigued. Whereas Vancouver, I think, is going to be a total tire fire. Vegas kind of intrigues me, because I kind of want to see how it comes together a little bit. Whereas I think, Vancouver doesn't interest me at all, because I think they're just a complete tire fire. At the end of the day, Vegas is going to be bad, but that's okay, because that's the plan.
And that's the expectation.
Right. And that's I think that's the plan too. Look at the the draft picks that they've accumulated. It's just, I don't, it's in their best interest to suck this year.
Yeah, especially when you consider this draft year is going to be it's going to be a very good draft, which is, good considering 2017 was kind of was okay. Yeah, but the 2018 draft is supposed to be I'm trying to pull up the top prospects right now, but you look at the 2018 draft offers a lot of really good defensemen. I mean, everybody's talking about Rasmus Dahlin, who obviously is probably going to be in the top 3, maybe the top 5, but nobody has said anything about Kalen Addison, who is a pretty damn good, I guess, offensively minded defenseman. There's going to be a good handful of defensemen. So if Vegas, let's say they do finish in the top 10, they're going to pry a good one for sure.
Yes. And then Ian makes horrible comments in the chat that I will not repeat on air. Yeah, I mean, look, I think, like I said, like Vegas, I didn't want to spend too much time on here, even though I know we're like deep into division preview territory here. But I just feel like there's not a whole lot we could say about Vegas that we haven't said already. And I applaud us for doing it as well as we did. We actually had a really deep mailbag today. And so I'm going to start.
Which we appreciate, of course.
Excuse me, absolutely appreciate. Rob wants us to give us our Atlantic Division projections. He also asked about Houston expansion. I don't want to go deep into Houston expansion because we did like an entire show on Houston not too long ago. I don't know if it's still up. I understand that right now the SoundCloud, because I don't work, that it doesn't have like our entire back catalog. Eventually it will, I promise. I just need to have a little more money flowing in so that I can channel it that direction, and then our whole back catalog will be here. Rob, my advice to you for the Houston episode is just go back on YouTube and throw it on. I feel like we talked about it for like a good 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really want to rehash that again because time is kind of the essence here. However, Atlantic Division preview, I will happily do. Do you want to go first, Jerk, or do you want me to go first?
Do you want me to say who I think is top 3, the standings, who I think will be good?
Let's go bottom to top.
Okay.
How about you go? How about you go 8th, and then I'll go 8th, and then you go 7th, and then I'll go 7th, and we'll fight.
Okay, so in 8th place, I have the Detroit Red Wings.
That is who I have as well.
Because they're bad and they should feel bad.
Yes, yeah, I have Detroit on the bottom here. I just feel like there's enough going on in this. This is another division. I feel like this division is very, very similar to the Pacific, where there's some teams that are just obviously in decline. There's some teams that are obviously on the way up, and man, Detroit is just such a mess. And of course, they'll make the playoffs again and make us look stupid. But I look at these teams and there's not a team that's declining worse in the division right now than Detroit, and I put them on the bottom. I think that they're going to be in for a rough time this year. Sorry,
yeah,
Detroit.
I agree with you. I think if they were relegated to the AHL, they would still be bad.
Ouch. Ouch. Okay, who do you have in 7th?
I have the Florida Panthers.
I have the Florida Panthers in 7th as well. My reasoning is front office has been really a disaster and the team has suffered for it. I like their goaltending. Defense is meh. And then their forwards are, you know what? Like they got just completely fleeced by Vegas. I know that, maybe Marchessault isn't, going to be a consistent scorer, but man, you look at the number of goals they let walk away this year, and I just don't know how this team's going to be good.
Yeah, I agree. I think the goaltending is good with Luongo and Reimer.
Yes,
but I still think it's kind of a question mark just because Luongo is getting older. The defense is okay, but Aaron Ekblad's injury problems concern me.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the forward core. I mean, we're in trouble.
We're in trouble now.
I think, like you said, Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith. That's a lot of goals that's leaving. Mm-hmm. And they do still have some good players, no doubt. They have Barkov, they have Huberdeau. They signed Radim Verbata, but it's going to be tough sailing for them.
Yeah. Kevin, how are you doing tonight, sir?
He's not ready yet.
Oh, he's not ready yet. My apologies. All right. Let's talk team number 6. Who do you got?
I have the Boston Bruins.
I have the Boston Bruins as well. This is not even entertaining anymore. Oh man, Boston Bruins.
Well.
Oh, here he is.
I wasn't even supposed to be on this show, but hell, why not? Hi, guys.
Why not? All right,
Hi,
hi.
I have
Kevin, we're
Vegas
talking
at
about the
7. I have no idea what you guys are talking about right now.
Right now,
actually.
we are breaking down the Atlantic Division. We both have Detroit.
The Atlantic Division.
I know. This is a question. We had a mailbag.
You expect me to cover 2 divisions? I don't have that kind of knowledge base.
I know.
It's not in his contract.
It's not his contract. That's fine. Just to recap, we had Detroit. We both had Detroit in 8th. We have Florida Panthers in 7th, and we both have the Boston Bruins in 6th. My reason for the Boston Bruins in 6th is there's a lot of things in Boston that I like. I just feel like, again, I don't know if there's enough there to make that real push forward. You know, like I feel like this is a team that is, I think it's on a good path. I think it's on a decent path. I don't say good path. It's on a decent path. There's some players that I really like, but I just can't help but feel like they're just treading water at this point still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Tuukka Rask, I think, is still a really good goalie, so they have that going for them. But, you know, the defensive core is young.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at Carlo, you look at McAvoy. You look at, I mean, Torrey Krug is established, but again, I don't think he's a number 2 defenseman on a Stanley Cup team. And, you know, Zdeno Chara is not getting younger or shorter for that matter. So it's really only a matter of time. Or faster, yeah. And their forward core, I mean, David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron they had good seasons, but they haven't been at their highest level, I feel, for the last 2 or so years. Then, you know, all of this drama going on with David Pastrnak, who knows what will happen there. Same thing with Ryan Spooner. There's a lot of kind of weird stuff going on there. And then I think David Backes, and it's well established even back to like long time ago. I'm not a fan of David Backes, and I will say that the type of hockey that Boston plays and the type of player that David Backes is, I think it's a perfect marriage. But I just don't like the price tag. I don't like what he brings, and he can score 20 goals, but he's probably going to be out there for a lot of goals against, or he's going to be in the box for some goals against.
Who do you have in? What do we got? We're up to 5th now.
5th place, I have the Ottawa Senators.
I have the Buffalo Sabres.
Ooh, okay. I have the Ottawa Senators there just because the injury to Erik Karlsson.
That's fair.
You know, Craig Anderson is kind of a question mark. You know, just because of age and, you know, family health issues and all that stuff. You know,
right.
I think Mike Condon is good, but he's not. I like their forward core, but, you know, Derek Brassard is kind of a question mark for me at this point. I want to see if Pajot can take the next step into being potentially a top 6 center. I want to see more from Kyle Turris. I want to see more from guys like Mark Stone and Mike Hoffman, and I want to see if Clark MacArthur can play a full season.
Yeah. I have Buffalo in 5th.
That's a great story, Clark MacArthur, by the way.
That is a great story. That's true. I have Buffalo in 5th, and here's the reason. Look, Jack Eichel's going to be there for the whole season, God willing, and I think that's going to help significantly. Is that going to be enough? I don't know. Robin Lehner. See, here's the problem, right? Like, all things being healthy, maybe Buffalo does finish 4th, but I just when has Robin Lehner been healthy other than last season?
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, and so I feel like if Robin Lehner goes down, then they're screwed. Like, you know, and I think there's still, like, Buffalo needs, I don't know what they need. They should be better than they are. They need defense is what they need. And yeah, so I have Buffalo in 5th. I think they're going to definitely improve this year. I don't know if it's going to be improved enough all the way to the playoffs. So in 4th, I have the Ottawa Senators, and I'm assuming you have Buffalo?
Yeah, I do have the Buffalo Sabres in 4th. My reasoning for Buffalo in 4th is I do agree Robin Lehner can't stay healthy, and he's kind of got an attitude problem. But I don't know. Even if he is in the net, I still don't feel like he has reached his full potential that he had when he was on the Ottawa Senators.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if he is going to get better, there's going to be some growing pains there, especially when, like you mentioned, the fact he hasn't played a full season in, I don't think, ever.
Right. Last season,
the defense is, yeah, the defense is better. You know, you have Ristolainen, who's good. You have Jake McCabe, who will be good. You picked
but is
up
Ristolainen number one?
I think so.
I don't think so.
And don't interrupt me, damn it.
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. You pick up Scandella, who I think is a very underrated defenseman. I think he's a good pickup for them. I think their defense is better,
yes,
but I don't think it gets them into a top 3 position. I like their forward core. I think Evander Kane had a breakout year last year, and I think he's sort of putting all the negativity behind him. I think Jack Eichel, I think, is a superstar, no doubt. Ryan O'Reilly has really matured a lot since coming from Colorado. I like what I've seen from Sam Reinhart. I want him to get better. I'm a big fan of Kyle Okposo. Again, another player who I feel is underrated. And I'm curious to see what Alex Nylander can do if he makes the team. I think he could be an interesting piece for them. And then obviously the darling of Latvia, Zemgus Girgensons.
He is going to have the opposite of a sophomore slump, because he had the freshman slump. He was not very good in the AHL last year, though. Now, he was only 18 years old, so, I mean, that's a tough transition, even no matter if it's the AHL, NHL, whatever, at 18. But that he's going to have to take a step forward and not regress even further this year.
Right. But Buffalo is one of those teams, but they're not a team that I pretend to be a fan of, but they are one of the teams that I have a soft spot for, and I would like to have them higher, but I just think 4th is at best, and 4th gives them the chance to sneak in with the wild card, but at the same time, the Metropolitan is just
such
deadly.
Yeah. I have Ottawa in 4th simply because Ottawa makes no sense. So that's where I put them, because I don't know what to make of Ottawa. This team always seems like it's like a playoff bubble team, even though it has no business being there. I don't know what to make of this team. I understand Craig Anderson's good. Their defense is okay. Their forwards are okay. Like this is a team that kind of defies logic, really, as far as how good they did last year. And I think they were a flash in the pan, but they still seem to hold it together enough that I can't help but, leave them on the bubble there. My number 3 team is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I have the Montreal Canadiens, number 3. Carey Price, still good, obviously. I think Pacioretty, very underrated scorer. I like Galchenyuk. I think Jonathan Drouin is a huge pickup for them. But beyond that, it's nothing new. The score, they've had a very top-heavy scoring lineup, which, they've done okay with, but, I don't think they're first in the division. And then their defense, I saw a tweet today that said the most likely defenseman to play with Shea Weber is David Schlemko. Like, come on. You're not doing yourself any favors if that's what your defensive core looks like. No, not to crap on David Schlemko, but he's not a number 2 defenseman.
I really struggled with this as to where to put Toronto and Montreal. And the reason I have Toronto in 3rd is because I don't think people realize how much went right for the Maple Leafs last year. And I think that as good as the Maple Leafs appear to be, I think that there needs to be a little bit of brake pumping on the Maple Leafs. I think that obviously look at the media is going to be behind, especially Canadian media is going to be behind the Leafs because they all in Toronto. I think Toronto, is an absolutely a playoff team. I don't think that they're all in the sudden this Eastern Conference juggernaut. There's just, this team basically, the thing with the Leafs last year was they were healthy basically the whole season, and they got, really good performances out of some of the rookies. Now, we've seen sophomore slumps before. Mitch Marner has a sophomore slump, or if Austin Matthews, heaven forbids, has a sophomore slump, this team's in trouble. This team's in a lot of trouble. Their defense is still it's good, but it's not great. And Freddie Anderson is a league average goalie, in my opinion.
It's fair to say.
So I think that as much as it's exciting, as you know, it's an exciting team, and I understand the hype around it. I just think that we need to pump the brakes a little bit on the Leafs. I think they're going to be good. I think the addition of Marleau was smart. I think it's going to help definitely add some scoring for them. But they're not. It's not like they're going neck and neck with the Penguins next year. Like it's.
How dare you?
I don't care. Yes, how dare I indeed. I just don't think so. So which means I have the Montreal Canadiens at second. Who do you have in second?
Second place, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Ooh.
I think losing Jason Garrison hurts their power play. I think losing Jonathan Drouin on a team that's not the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think would hurt them a lot more. But because they already have a good handful of scores, I think they were able to part with Jonathan Drouin. I mean, their defense is kind of iffy at best. I mean, I like Victor Hedman. I like Anton Strawman. I'm curious to see who picks up that slack. If it's, if it is Mikhail Sergachev, if it is
right.
Slater Cuckoo. The defensive core, I feel, is going to be a project. Same thing with the goaltending. I think Vasilevsky is good, but I still think he has a lot to prove. And I think ultimately they'll be okay in those regards. But the forward core, I mean, it's, Steven Stamkos is going to be healthy, and Nikita Kucherov is probably one of the best goal scorers in the league. Mm-hmm. And, I expect guys like Johnson and Palat to have bounce back years. I want to see what kind of sophomore year Braden Point can have. And I feel like my analysis makes it sound like I'm not on board with them as number 2, but I actually think that a lot of things are going to go right with them just because so much went wrong for them last year.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think they're due for a resurgence.
Not only are Tampa Bay getting Steven Stamkos back this season, they're also getting Ryan Callahan back this season, who missed almost the entire year. So.
Right.
Well,
I have I like in the chat, Life Without Bishop. Isn't that like half of every season? He's not wrong. He's not wrong. I have Montreal. I have Montreal in second for one reason and one reason only. Carey Price.
Who?
Carey Price.
Oh.
Some goalie that they have.
That guy?
Yeah, that guy.
I heard he's all right.
I hear he's all right too. The thing that I don't think that Drouin, I don't think Drouin replaces Radulov. I don't think that he gives you the same things that they lost in Radulov, and I don't know where the scoring is going to come from on this team. But we have seen this team in the past have Carey Price just keep them out of trouble, and even though they can't somehow score, Carey Price, pitches a shutout, and Montreal coasts to the first place in the division. We've seen it so many times, and I just... Montreal, could they fall and would it surprise me? No, but I just feel like Carey Price has done this so many times that him alone is the only reason I have this team in second. Otherwise, I might have bumped the Leafs up one. But
see, and go ahead,
that's okay. I'm done.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I think Jonathan Drouin will be able to replace what Alex Radulov.
I don't think they do the same things though. I think Drouin's going to give them some goals. I just don't think he's going to. He's not as heavy as he doesn't play as heavy a game as Radulov did.
That's a fair assessment. I think in terms of points, I think they'll be okay. But the physical game is something I didn't consider. But even then, I still think
Montreal, they're all tiny.
That is true. It is true.
All right, I have a question for you guys then,
sure.
Based on this Montreal, because while you guys have been chatting, I've been putting my order together. I also can see Toronto or Montreal flip-flopped. So the question is, if both Jonathan Drouin and Patrick Marleau fail to impress in their new cities, who gets it more from the media and the fans?
Drouin.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. Just because Drouin is from Montreal and he speaks French and he's supposed to be the savior, and if he's not, then it'll be the same thing as
everyone else has gone through Montreal.
Yeah, everyone else ever versus Patrick Marleau. if he doesn't, meet expectations, it's like, well, yeah, he should be doing more, but he's an older veteran who.
Okay. All right.
Patrick Marleau is not in Toronto to be the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
that's an excellent
supposed to be the guy.
Yeah.
So I feel like Patrick Marleau will get less because I feel like there's problems with the Leafs. They're going to be looking at guys like Mitch Marner, Nylander, Matthews, JVR. I feel like if Marleau doesn't come according to expectations, he's going to hear it, but I don't think he's going to be the poster boy for what went wrong.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, guys.
So my number one team is Tampa Bay for a lot of the same reasons that Jerk said. I think that so much went wrong for Tampa Bay last season. The defense, of course, going to need work, but I feel this is a team that when healthy is been pretty much a threat to take the Eastern Conference every year, and I don't think they're that much worse than they were before.
I only picked them to win the Stanley Cup last year.
Right. No, exactly. And I think I had, I think when going into the season, I feel like I had Tampa Bay going a long way in the East as well. And they got completely derailed by injuries. I don't think they're that much worse. I think, there's the Diesel project, but I think Vasilevsky's performed well enough. Like he's not maybe, I don't know if they're a Stanley Cup favorite with Vasilevsky in net, but I feel like he has done well enough that they are at least a contender.
Yeah.
So that is the Atlantic Division. So moving on to the next question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I didn't say my number.
I'm sorry. What is your number one, Jerk? And then we'll let Kevin chime in here.
And I'm going to break the internet here.
Okay.
My number one for the Atlantic Division is the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know what? I've been a huge fan of Frederik Andersen since he was on the Anaheim Ducks. I think maybe the numbers say he's a league average goalie, but I've seen him in games where he's able to take it to another level. And there were a lot of games where he was the reason the Ducks won or at least stayed in the game.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Frederik Andersen. I like Morgan Riley, and Jake Gardner, I think, gets a lot of heat despite the fact that he's actually undeserved heat. Even though he got the big extension, I still want to see some more improvement from Nikita Zaitsev, which I think we will see. And the forward core, I like Nazem Kadri. I like JVR.
Mm-hmm.
The kids obviously are good. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Connor Brown. Leo Komarov is only 2 seasons removed from 20 goals. And then you add, Patrick Marleau, who I believe will still hit 20 this year.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get good goaltending, and if the defense can take the steps in the right direction, I will not be surprised if they're number one in the Atlantic when it's all said and done. Vince G says the Penguins are number one. Vince G says the Penguins are number one in my heart.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, the Penguins are the number one in the Atlantic. Actually, so with you guys running down the Atlantic, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, I'm not saying there's a division worse than the Pacific, but I think there's a division with more question marks in the Pacific, and that's the Atlantic Division. So from 8 to 1, I have Detroit, Buffalo, Boston, Ottawa, Florida, Montreal, Toronto, and Tampa Bay leading the way. But I think Tampa Bay is worse this year than they were last year, and they didn't even make the playoffs last year. So injuries aside. So I'm looking at this division like, they have a lot of 7 through 10 teams, if you would. Obviously, only 4 teams can do that. But I'm not really seeing anything that jumps out and makes me go, that's the team that's going to take this division home. No problem whatsoever. I'm expecting thorough domination again from the Metropolitan Division out of that conference.
And that's where I'm at, too, because I feel like, yes, the Leafs are good. I'm not saying the Leafs are bad. But I just feel like if they were in any other division, would we be so scared of them? And I don't think we would be at this point. I still think that there's room there to grow.
See, my logic for having Toronto as number one and then having Buffalo, who, like I said, I like, but having them in fourth, I think the entire Atlantic Division, save for Detroit and the Florida Panthers, is jump ball. Really.
Yeah, no,
And-
I don't disagree.
And I any of the teams that you and I and Kevin have in our top four, I could see any of them win the division. And we saw this year where, you know, Boston was in a wild card spot and the analysts were like, well, they're still, you know, 1 win away from the division lead.
Right.
So I think we're going to see more of that.
What I do like for Boston, though, is they have a couple of kids, Rob O'Gara and Matt Grzelcyk, who could be making the jump this year. So defensively, especially with Rask there, although I think I'm the only one of the group that actually does like Tuukka Rask, but I think they'll be all right on the back end. But you, especially you, Hockey Jerk, really nailed their woes up at forward. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the Panthers, I think I put them higher up. Like, I crapped on the Panthers from the season preview on last year. I have them fourth this year just because they finally have some stability. So,
yeah, it's hard. Like, honestly,
it really is jump ball in that division.
It really is. Like, there's no. I don't think like I feel like Tampa should be the best team in that division, but. Oh, not as confident as I would have been, you know, once upon a time. Okay, so we're really crunched for time here, so I'm going to try and get through these last questions a little more quickly. Ian Steffenson asked us a question, basically a couple of scenarios what the lineup might be. I'm just going to go with the opening night lineup. For one, I hate speculating super far into the end of the season because we haven't even played preseason games yet. So this is my opening night lines. That I will give you, and then we can probably delve into some other stuff later on. This is the lineup as I have it. I have Joe Thornton on the first line centering Timo Meier and Joe Pavelski. I have Couture centering Donskoy and Hansen. I have Hurdle centering Carlson and Mikhail Bodker. I have Tierney centering Sorensen and Ward and Carpenter as the seventh forward. I think the defense goes without saying. It's going to be Vlasic, Braun, Martin, Burns, Dylan / DeMello / Heed somewhere, you know, some combination of those three will be in the bottom, with the other one being the seventh defenseman. So, and Martin Jones is obviously starting in goal. Aaron Dell is his backup.
What? Aaron Dell's not going to start?
Yeah, I know. What am I thinking? That is how I see the opening night starting out, and it's consistent with what I've been saying on the show the whole time, and that is that Timo Meier and Sorensen are, in my opinion, the locks to make the roster. And when you look at the other bodies that are still there, there's just no room left at the end for I think Kevin Labanc is starting in the AHL.
Right. Hey, well, there you go. They'll finally have a right wing this season in the Barracuda.
Kirk, what do you have?
Okay, so for my lines, I have Joe Thornton centering Joe Pavelski and Jannik Hansen. Just because I think Hansen brings speed to that line that's very essential. I have Logan Couture centering Jonas Donskoy and Marcus Sorensen. Again, Sorensen's speed will make up what we lose in Marleau and what Bodker is supposed to bring. I have Hurdle centering the third line with Bodker and Carlson, mainly because I think those three would mesh really well together. And then I have the fourth line with Timo Meier, Chris Tierney, and Joel Ward. And I would like to have Timo Meier higher in the lineup, but I want him to kind of work out the sort of thugginess that he developed in the AHL for the playoffs. And I think
no more Diet Lucic.
And I think, you know, limited time on the fourth line, he can kind of get back to where he was in the playoffs. But we'll see. NHL playoffs, that is. Ryan Carpenter is my extra. The D-core is exactly how Ian said, and sadly, Aaron Dell will not be the starter. It will be Martin Jones. Yeah, that's my lineup. I know. I'm sorry.
Kevin, you got a list?
Not a Sharks list. Here are my Barracuda lines right now, because that's the only thing I keep track of these days. So I've got Balkers, O'Regan, and Kevin Labanc, because you just convinced me that Kevin Labanc will be in the minors. So Ryan Carpenter gets the bump up. That's my top line right now on the Barracuda. Second line, Adam Haluka, Rourke Chartier, and Barclay Goodrow. I really hope will get moved over to the right side. I think he's better over there anyway. Plus, they have a gaping hole at right wing. Third line is John McCarthy, Philip Sandberg, and Alex Shaneborn. I'd like to see Zach Boychuk there at right wing. Fourth line, Colby McCauley, Tim Clifton, I guess is going to be the fourth line center, and John Martin at right wing with Brandon Bolig as the extra forward. On defense, Joachim Ryan and Radim Šimek are the top pair because I think Tim Heed will get up.
Yeah.
Jacob Middleton, good. Congratulations on your contract. And Nick DeSimone as the second pair, Kevin Fitzgerald and Julius Bergman as the third pair with Michael Brodzinski as the seventh defenseman, and the goalies, Troy Grosnick and Antoine Bibeau, but we know that. So,
wow.
Where do you have Jeremy Waugh?
Jeremy Waugh, you know what? I didn't even consider that. But
I have Jeremy Waugh playing in the QJMHL.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, and I could be dead wrong on this, I think he still has another year of eligibility because he missed
because of his birthday.
And Vince is asking, where's Zach Boychuk playing right now? As far as I'm aware, he's just training. He's not signed anywhere. So,
yeah, training. Sorry,
I think Jeremy Waugh is eligible for the AHL because
he's eligible for the AHL.
He's eligible, but I'm pretty sure like Haluka, he could go back to junior for another year.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, I didn't think that was what we were talking about. Okay.
Yeah, no, he's
like Haluka, Haluka started
AHL.
with the Barracuda and then he went down.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. I'm trying not to rush this too bad here, but I got to get us moving here. Jay Clark 5000 asks, the Sharks have Burns, Lassick, Jones signed until 2024. Bodker and Carlson are currently the longest signed forward, signed until 2020. Obviously, John Tavares would be nice in this mix. Who in the Shark system do we expect to be signed long-term besides Timo Meier and Logan Couture going forward? Jerk, I guess I'll let you have a stab at this first.
Well, Joe Pavelski, because he's the captain. And when his contract expires, I believe he will be 34. So that sets him up for. I think so. I think if he gets. I mean, I love Joe Pavelski. Joe Pavelski's my guy, but I think 6 years might be kind of a lot. I think they go for a 3-year deal with him. Beyond that, I mean. It's hard to say just because, you could look at a roster projection from 2 years ago and it'll have Matt Nieto as being a top 6 forward in the future. But I could see, obviously Hurdle. I think letting Hurdle go when his contract expires would be moronic. I like Melker Karlsson, but I think Melker Karlsson might get to a point where he can be higher in the lineup on a different team when his deal expires, and so I think he would leave, but it's hard to say. It's definitely, with Marlowe leaving and then Joe Thornton not young, I think there's going to be a lot of holes up for grabs in the next, 2, 3, 4 years. So it's going to be interesting.
I see. For me, I don't know if I extend Pavelski past this deal. Like I might shop him at the deadline. Well, by the time.
Wow, my eyebrows raised.
By the time Pavelski's deal's done, Joe Thornton will be long gone. Joe Pavelski without Joe Thornton is nothing to write home about. Joe Pavelski at 34 without Joe Thornton will probably be even less to write home about. I love Joe Pavelski, but at the same time, this team should be well into a retooling rebuild by then. Why would you keep Joe Pavelski at that point? You could get something for him. I think the only guy that you really keep long-term, I'm not even sure you keep Timo Meier. Unless Timo Meier completely shoots out the lights this season, you bridge contract him into oblivion. Logan Couture, definitely. You keep Logan Couture as long as humanly possible. And then the only other guy I would even consider is Hurdle, and that's a huge if based on what he does this season. And, when they decide, is this guy a forward? Is he a wing? Is he a wing that can score? And again, is he a wing that can score without Joe Thornton? That's my opinion. Now I got to go look in the chat to see how bad I'm getting yelled at.
See, and I have to disagree with you saying without Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski is nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think he's nothing. I just don't think he is going to command. I don't think it would be illogical for him to command the amount of dollars that he will probably demand and probably get from Doug Wilson. That is my concern.
That's fair to say, but my counter argument to that is the seat from 06-07, which was his rookie year, to the lockout half year, which was his last year without playing on Joe Thornton's wing, he averaged about 55 points a season, which is not $7 million a year.
Right.
But that's not bad either. And even those last 2 years, he was almost close to 70 while centering the third line or the second line. And I do agree, Joe Pavelski without Joe Thornton is probably not a 40 goal scorer.
Right.
An effective player. And I feel like people tend to forget that.
Oh, I'm not saying he won't be I'm just saying the price that he will demand will not match. Like, I mean, if Joe Thornton's deal wasn't a 1-year deal, I would be like, I would just mutilate my face on my keyboard, and that would be the whole podcast. I mean, but the fact that it's a 1-year deal, fine, pay him whatever the heck you want. It's 1 year, who cares? But I mean, if that deal went any longer, I would be mangling my face on the keyboard. It'd be terrible. Go ahead.
I with Hockey Jerk on this though. I mean, Joe Pavelski, I believe, had a 31 goal season when he wasn't playing with Joe Thornton on his line.
Younger Joe Pavelski.
Huh?
That was a much younger Joe Pavelski, though.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, he had numerous 25 goal seasons before that. I mean, again, you're right. With Thornton, he went from 25 goals to 35 goals per season and upwards. But I think he can still hang.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's a guy who's getting up there in age, unfortunately. 34. I mean, you're past your prime by that point. There's gonna be a decline there, regardless of Thornton or no Thornton. I'm just not sure how big that decline is. But we really got to get out of here because we really have run a little longer than I wanted to. And I promise. Do I feel the same with old Couture? How old's Couture now?
I
feel like he's in his
26, I think.
Yeah, 28. Couture's still got some good years left in him. I think. I mean, 34-year-old Couture. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about 34-year-old Couture, but I feel better about Couture than I do about Pavelski. I think Couture is a better player than Joe Pavelski. Period.
He's definitely a better skater than Pavelski.
So I don't know. Logan Couture is, as much as I crap on Logan Couture on the regular on this show, Logan Couture is probably the best player currently wearing that jersey right now. And that's just the reality of it. I have no problem with Couture being around into his thing because I feel like his game is far more well-rounded and he can decline gracefully. I think Logan Couture is a guy that could decline gracefully into eventually a third line role and still be very, very effective.
Agreed.
That's what I think there. Okay. We really need to get out of here though. So final thoughts, Kevin.
I just want to say, Manny Vieder. I could put Manny Vieder on that Barracuda fourth line there. So there's your right wing there instead of John Martin. Again, I'm at Kevin Lacey 22. I tweeted out something earlier today or retweeted from Sheng Peng. He had a great article about Vadim Shipachev and how he could translate over to the NHL from the KHL. So check that out on my Twitter feed. 6 years ago today, we lost the Locomotive team. I still wear this bracelet with love. So thank you guys for having me on.
Absolutely. Mr. Hockey Jerk.
You can follow me on Twitter at hockey_jerk. I'm not a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. I would be wearing my Locomotive bracelet. I do have one, but when I moved a couple years ago, I lost it. So yeah, I'm wearing it in spirit, of course. And if I find it, by all means, I will send a picture out because I feel like I had it even up to last year, but besides the point, we're all really fortunate that you stuck with us through our supersized show. I think we're going up to like 90 minutes by this point, but we appreciate the support, obviously, and
the subscriptions.
Yes,
and the subscriptions and the tweets, and you know what? 11 days. The Sharks' first preseason game is in 11 days. We're almost there, you guys.
Yeah, my final thoughts are obviously prospect tournament this weekend, correct? Streaming on San Jose Sharks website. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll definitely, we're going to come back next week. We'll talk, we'll have the Edmonton Oilers to kind of get through our division preview. Hopefully we'll have some stuff to talk about in the prospect game. Ideally, now that all the other podcasts are coming back, we appreciate obviously you guys listening, but I know that it's a huge demand on your time when we go an hour and 30 minutes every show. So we're definitely going to try and cut this back down to an hour, so that not only an hour so that you can listen to other podcasts. I don't, because there's a lot of nice Sharks podcasts out there, and I'm not going to tell you just to listen to us, because I feel like we're fortunate that you choose to listen to us. And I would never,
Absolutely.
I would never demand that you don't, listen to other things. Definitely want to be mindful of your time. And also I want to do some Barracuda stuff too, which is going to be its own show. So that being said, subscribe, tell your friends, tell 2 friends, tell 3 friends, get them paying attention to us. We're going to do some great stuff this season. Thanks for sticking with us through the off season. And next week we actually get to talk about actual hockey. Yay. All right, guys, have a good one.
Miller.